Hey everyone, Craig here, and today I'm going to do something that I've wanted to do for a long time, and that's a video about my lab. So for probably the last, I don't know, a couple of months, I've had some tin in my rack in the garage that's been earmarked to set up oVirt and FreeNAS on, and I've kind of been putting off and putting off. Not, this time isn't good enough, that time's not good enough, but finally I'm getting around to doing it. So what I want to do today is just kind of talk about what it is that I want to do, and then in future videos we're going to go through and I'll walk you through the whole setup. So let's start off by having a look at what we've got so far. Okay, so here's the lab. So this is the tin we're going to be building out. So let me give you a quick tour around it. So this is my Synology box. This is a fantastic bit of kit. I really love this device. It's got 3 terabyte discs in there at the minute. It's got all the gigabit LAN ports at the back filled up. My goal is actually to remove this from my setup, not because it's bad or anything like that. It's just kind of, I want to move to something a bit bigger that has a bit more options in terms of expansion and is actually a bit cheaper to expand into. So this unit here is going to be our new storage box. It's a Proliant GL380E, and it's a Gen 8. It's actually really quite nice. So I've got this filled up with SSDs. They're nothing fancy, they're just WD blues. And I've got a 5 spinny WD 5 terabyte discs, so I think they were the biggest I could get hold of at the time. Just so I've got some cold storage, and the intention is to move the storage from here into these discs so that I can decommission this. As I said, this is a fantastic unit and I likely will keep using it in the future, but I'm kind of aiming, at least until I get another shelf of discs, I'm aiming to kind of try and get rid of that. The next few U's we've got up here, these are G5s. They're not likely to be part of this lab. They're just kind of placeholders so that I don't have air rushing through. Not that it particularly matters in this room. I'm kind of in my garage here. You can see everything's kind of coated in a layer of dust, and if you're wondering what this green sheeting is as well, the idea there is this is going to keep some of the dust out. You'll have to excuse the mess as well. Everything's absolutely filthy because I'm still trying to figure out where things are going to go, and actually I'm a bit lazy when it comes to cleaning up. Okay, so compute wise, we've got 6 DL360 Gen 8s. So these are going to be the compute for our cluster. So all these ones, 1, 2 and 3, they're going to be the first to join the oVirt cluster. The reason for that is the other 3, they're currently running VMware with vSAN. If you haven't had a look at VMware, vCenter and all that kind of stuff, there's a great vMug, VM user group thingy bob that you can start acquiring actually decent licenses for VMware. So it makes it really nice if you want to have a bit of a play around with what they've got. And so I've got a 3 nodes VMware vSAN bit set up here. But my intention is that the stuff that's running on these will get eventually migrated to our new oVirt cluster. Just again so that I'm running open source. I really like VMware. It's kind of my de facto go-to hypervisor if I want anything that, you just plug it in and it works. But I kind of, I want to move over to oVirt. So network-wise, we've got 2 Cisco switches. Again, these are cast-offs from a company I used to work for. So all these are doing is management and kind of all of the VLAN traffic. So any kind of data goes across these at the moment. May use the 10 gig network for inter VM traffic and vMotion and stuff like that, which kind of leads me nicely around the back of the lab here. So at the back, again, excuse the crappy wiring job, we've got a Ubiquiti 10 gig switch. I was really happy to get this thing in because up until then I was running a bunch of, you can see each of these boxes have 4 gig Ethernet ports. I was running a weirdness of round robin on iSCSI and LACP and all sorts of weirdness, which wasn't very comfortable. It didn't feel right, so I decided to chuck in one of these switches. It's a bit of a shame that this thing doesn't seem to blow the air through from the back to the front of the switch, so it does get a little bit warm, but it's not anywhere near as hot as, say, the Cloud Key or anything like that. I've pretty much filled this thing to capacity, and most of these boxes already have, I don't know if you can quite see that, but most of these things have 2 DACs in them, so they've got 2 10 gig connections. I think if I was doing this again, I probably, and maybe in the future I will, get shorter DAC cables. I went for 10 gig assuming that this thing was going to be around the front of the rack and I was going to have all the networky bits at the front, but as it's turned out, I've stuck a patch panel here that I was intending to pass through all of the, well, I think, pass through all the ILO remote management stuff. And I was going to pass the management stuff through as well, but I was having some issues with the connectors that I chose for this patch panel, so that's just staying as it is. It's functional for now, but I need to improve it. And so yeah, you can kind of see in there, they're all full of cables, which is quite nice. So that should give us 20 gigabit of throughput per box, depending how we use it. Obviously, if we start looking at iSCSI round robining or anything like that, then should be quite interesting. And there's storage boxes down here. I didn't have enough DACs, so I've got 1 fiber cable coming out of that. We've got what's this? It's a serial cable for remote management of the switches, just in case I brick anything. Those Cisco switches at the front there, they're stacked, so they just function as a single switch, which is quite nice. Again, you've got ILO and you've got a management network cable there as well. And at some point in the future, a friend of mine passed me this bad boy, a Brossards, however you pronounce that, 200E. It's a fibre channel switch, and one thing that I've never played with is fibre channel. So he very, very kindly lent me this. He actually traipsed this thing across London for me, so we'll see if we can get that into the lab at some point. I was thinking maybe using probably one of these things. These are G5s, but they've got slightly more CPUs than the ones that are actually in the rack there. But they've already got the 4 gig fiber channel cards. So yeah, we'll see if we can use that. I've got a HP G7 tower somewhere as well, which would be probably perfect to put the discs out of the Synology unit from the front end as well. Just to act as a kind of backup store or something like that. Okay, so now we know what we've got to build on, let's figure out what it is that we're going to build. So my use case here is I want to build a platform that I can automate against. I can put VMs on, I can destroy VMs, I can give people accounts, I can use quotas, I can have centralized storage, vMotion type behaviors, all that kind of stuff. And so I've picked out 2 technologies to help me with that. So the first thing that we're going to have to look at is our storage. And so for storage, I've chosen FreeNAS. So FreeNAS I've used for a couple of years now in production. And the only time it's been rock solid, the only time I've had any kind of issues with it has been when I've tried to do something that's weird or off-piste. In my case, I was deploying InfiniBand, and InfiniBand isn't supported out of the box. It's supported in FreeBSD, but not in FreeNAS, and so I had to do a little bit of fiddling about to get that to work, and it wasn't the most stable thing for a number of reasons, but it was nothing to do with FreeNAS. It was all my own pain, brought all upon myself. That's why you don't go off-piste, kids. And so FreeNAS is a fantastic product. It's there's a commercial version and there's a community version. I'm going to be using the community version, and it ticks all my boxes. So it's got NFS support, it's got iSCSI support for my block devices. I'm going to have a bit of an experiment between running my data stores between NFS or iSCSI just to see if there's any kind of performance or functional trade-offs. It's easier to back up NFS than it is iSCSI devices remotely, so that could be something to investigate with that. It's got a nice web interface that has an API as well, and then it's got some nice features that I probably won't take advantage of at the moment, things like snapshotting and replication and stuff like that. It's also based on ZFS, and so ZFS is a file system that you've got to be quite aware of if you're going to use it. It's not like ext or XFS or something like that. It doesn't just care about a single disk. It cares about a bunch of disks, and it kind of implements its own RAID type mechanisms through software as opposed to hardware. And so for this reason, we normally give the ZFS direct access to the disk and the controllers. And what you'd normally want to do is give, just a bunch of disks to ZFS, to FreeNAS, and let it do its thing. Unfortunately, in my case, in these HP ProLiants, the storage card I've got is a P420, and there's no JBOD mode. There's no just telling it pass the disks through. And so because of that, I've had to configure them as a bunch of RAID 0 devices, which is okay. It's not optimal. There's you lose out on some smart functionality, and you lose out on some of the more direct kind of hardware accessy type stuff that ZFS will do for your disks. So if you have a failure, ZFS probably isn't going to see that a disk has failed. And I've also left caching enabled on the disks, which again, ZFS doesn't really like caching. I've left it on because I want to see what the impact is. I've ran it in this configuration before on this particular piece of hardware, so it should be okay. It was perfectly fine there, and so we'll see what happens. But anyway, yeah, so FreeNAS is going to be our storage technology. Again, massively solid, highly recommend it. For our virtualization platform, we're going to be swapping out VMware and putting in oVirt. So oVirt is the community version of Rev, which is Red Hat's virtualization technology, and it's all based on KVM. It's not quite as full featured as VMware is. Red Hat have not been doing this as long as VMware have in terms of the virtualization. So it's quite an interesting technology. I've used this a little bit in the past, but not kind of any kind of massive scale. What really kind of attracted me to this is kind of how it implements quotas, and it's got kind of a user portal as well. So if I give somebody access to my platform, I can restrict them to only be able to do certain things and use certain data stores and use certain networks. So it means that if someone rocks up to me and says, "Hey, I want to do this," I can just give them a login and away they go, and they won't see, say, my management components or the stuff that I'm working on or anything like that. In terms of actually how it kind of works, it's very similar to VMware. There's a hypervisor, there's a management engine, and it all kind of comes together to form clusters. But we'll go into a bit more detail about how it all gets put together when we actually start building this thing. So in the next video, we're going to be covering building FreeNAS and sticking FreeNAS together. And then in future videos, we'll start layering stuff in on top of that. So FreeNAS and oVirt, then we'll see where we go from there. I think that's pretty much it. So thank you for watching. Hopefully you've enjoyed this. If you have, please like, subscribe, do some of the YouTube-y things. If you didn't, leave me a comment, give me some feedback. I'd really appreciate it.